we call them insureds, but, veterinarians who have professional liability insurance and are insured by the company can call anytime. So we take a lot of insured phone calls, to answer questions, or they're in a tough situation and need some advice. But I really love reviewing the claims, and it's really like I'm back at school. My textbooks are all dusted off. We do a lot of research, particularly I think my small animal surgery book gets the biggest workout, finding research or support for, certain claims or situations or whatnot. So my textbooks have really come out of the closet and getting a workout again. So that was my biggest surprise, is that I'm kind of like back at school.
That's Dr. Kara Scudia, our guest on this week's episode of My Veterinary Life podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Marcy Kirk, and I use the pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm joined by our other co-host, Dr. Anna Reddish.
Hey, y'all. I use the pronouns she, her, hers.
Well, I can't think of a better way to wrap up our mini-series of interviewing AVMA Trust veterinarians than to have Dr. Escudia on. As you'll hear in the episode, Kara and I are very good friends. We went to undergrad and vet school together, and it was so fun chatting with her and just kind of sharing more about her story and her passion for this and how she kind of got interested in, insurance claims and things like that, and how she feels it's helping our colleagues. And I just really enjoyed the conversation. I laughed so hard. She brought up some really good vet school memories for me, but she also talked about how one of the, silver linings or one of the hidden gems of her job is she gets to use her textbooks a lot more than she expected. So never maybe throw away those textbooks. They may come around and help you again. So it's a super fun conversation, and I really enjoyed chatting with her.
Agreed. I felt very validated in my decision as I was in our basement storage the other day and I saw the boxes of giant textbooks, and I thought, no, I need them. So now I know I might, kind of hold on to those investments. But we had such a great time chatting with Kara about her journey, like Marcy said, and then also the important and amazing work she does with AVMA Trust. So this series has just been so fun. And again, we say it throughout the episode, but we hope that you've learned more about these veterinarians and the unique role that they play in the profession, but also how much the trust is doing to really protect the profession and take care of you. Speaking of people that are passionate about the profession, we want to share a quick word from our sponsor and friends at Hills Pet Nutrition. Founded more than 75 years ago with an unwavering commitment to pet nutrition, Hill's mission is to help enrich and lengthen the special relationships between people and their pets. The right nutrition, combined with the devotion of veterinary professionals, can transform the lives of pets, and healthy and happy pets can transform the lives of pet parents.
This is why Hills continues to drive research and innovation to help the wide array of patients you see every day, including recent breakthrough advances in managing derm patients through nutrition as a standalone recommendation or part of a multimodal treatment plan. This is all in an effort to make your day-to-day management of cases a little easier. Hills is a proud sponsor of My Veterinary Life podcast and the AVMA.
Well, welcome to the show, Dr. Kara Escudia.
Thank you.
We are really pumped to talk to you today, and this has been such a fun mini series, so we just can't wait to hear your journey. Marcia probably knows way more of your journey, but we'll get into that here. There's some good, probably vet school stories. But we want to start at the beginning of your journey. So can you start with telling the listeners how you became interested in the veterinary profession?
Yeah, definitely. And I know you hear it all the time, but I always planned on being a veterinarian. But I have a framed coloring sheet from kindergarten that says I will be a veterinarian. So I have the documented proof. But also when I was young, I always had a lot of anxiety when my pets would go to the vet because I didn't know what they were going to say or diagnose or recommend. And I hate surprises. I hate being blindsided. So I always wanted to know before they knew. So my solution was to become a veterinarian.
I feel like this is foreshadowing for where your career is going to go. Like you don't like being blindsided and now you work in insurance. So that's really funny. So yes, as Anna alluded to, Kara and I actually went to undergrad and vet school together. I'm sure it was ANSI 100 that we met in. It had to be, but all our classes were together. So, and the kind of third little part of our trio was Dr. Samuel Hampton, who's already been on the podcast. So we had a lot of fun, and yeah, getting into veterinary school together was amazing. So I don't know, like I forget, when you applied to veterinary school, didn't you want to be an equine?
So I had that thought in the back of my head. I really liked equine sports medicine, and and initially when I applied, that was my interest. But then I did a summer thing at a vet clinic where you could stay on site at an equine only clinic, and I stayed on site for, I think it was like 2 weeks. And I really was a fish out of water. And I realized that, my lifetime experience with cats and dogs was really where I needed to stay. I rode horses growing up and that sort of thing, just for fun. But, when you're standing around talking to clients, like I wasn't making good conversation. Like I just didn't fit in. Like I'm glad I realized before I started school that it was not my niche.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. But it's interesting because you went feline only for a little bit. And I feel like there's some nuances. People are gonna like scream at they're listening, but between like equine and feline only, I feel like I don't know how to put it into words, but there are just these little bits that sort of are some of the same ways your brain needs to work. I don't know. Do you agree with that?
Horses and cats are always the exception to the rule.
Right.
Always.
Okay.
Right?
That's what it is.
I can see why your brain is grouping that together, because I always remembered in pharmacology, I would be like, now this is how it works. No, except for horses and cats. It does not work that way for them.
Yes, they're very special.
They are very special. Well, I have to pick your brain a little bit. Do you have a favorite memory from vet school? Like before we got on air, we were talking about our McDonald's Cinemelts obsession and how they're no longer on the menu. So if anyone would like to start a letter writing campaign with us to bring those back, I'm on board. If you don't know what those are, they were kind of like, I don't know, like monkey bread, like pull apart cinnamon. They were delicious and very inexpensive, which is very important in veterinary school. And we would take turns buying them on test days because we always sat next to each other. And we always, I don't know, guys, in vet school, right? You have your spot, like there's your spot and you don't sit anywhere else. So Kara and I sat next to each other. But what do you have any other favorite memories from?
I think hands down, my favorite memory is when the annual cookout was cut short due to a tornado watch. And we all had to evacuate the ICU, and there were animals and people all over the basement, and our significant others were helping out, carrying pets downstairs. And it's like, welcome to the world of dating a veterinarian or a vet student. Like you will be called on to help.
I had forgotten about that. I mean, you just looked, I wish we didn't take pictures because it was clients' pets and stuff, but everywhere, like people were holding IV bags up and like pets on laps because this tornado came through. But how fortunate that there were so many vet students on premises to help evacuate, those.
Right? After hours, enjoying their weekend. Yep, we were there.
That's hilarious. I would not expect that y'all would have a tornado story from vet school going to the University of Illinois. I mean, I went to vet school in Alabama, so I've got a lot of vet school tornado stories. But I was not expecting those weather events for y'all.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got every bit, like we get tornadoes. We don't get hurricanes or anything, but we get a lot of weird things. That was really fun. Okay, that was a good one. So I kind of alluded to it, but you ended up going the route of feline medicine for a while. In fact, you founded a Illinois chapter of the American Association of Feline Practitioners, like student chapter. Yeah. I remember many lunch sessions that we planned together. I think KFC was our kind of go-to catering because it was very inexpensive and we always loved the leftovers. But Was it like, I know your cats were really special. So was it your cats that like sparked that interest, or how did that start?
It actually, and it was the AAFP student chapter, was there, but it wasn't active for a couple years. So it was more of resurrecting it from the archives. And I forget, I was trying to sign up for something or do something with the AAFP, and they said you needed to be a student member. And I don't even remember what it was regarding, but I was like, oh, well, I guess I need to start this chapter up again so I can be the member and the president. But it ended up being, we had some really good lectures, and it was a fun experience. I hope it's still going. I haven't checked in lately, but I hope it's still going strong.
Yeah, we'll have to check. It reminds me, because I ended up being the vice president, because it was one of those, remember how we like pulled sim into everything in undergrad? Like, I feel like that was one of those situations. You're like, okay, we're doing this and you're going to have this role.
Here's your position. Please plan the meetings.
Yeah.
But then we had like the booth at open house and whatnot, and the kids loved doing the exams on the cats or the pretend cats, so it was a good experience.
So after feline medicine, then you went into small animal, and kind of came back to the Chicago area. And then you kept adding to your family, not just pets. So you have 2 young boys, and I'm just curious, how did that work for you and your family to kind of balance clinical work? And, because that's a big issue facing the profession. So how did you guys make that work?
Yeah. So, any veterinarian mom out there is going to tell you that it is hard. It is very hard. And I have 2 little boys. One is 2.5 years old, and the other one is 11 months old. And the older one learned very quickly to wait for me to sit down to feed the baby or change the baby. And he was gone, climbing shelves, bothering the dog, digging in the trash, your standard toddler chaos. So it was a lot to keep up with, and like you said, initially I was in clinical practice when I had them, and it was hard to have cases running over, catching up on phone calls, getting out late. I was, just really unreliable. So initially I had made the jump from a privately owned clinic to a corporate practice, where they were so large, I was able to work fewer hours, and still be maintained full time. I wasn't missing daycare. I was getting out on time, those sort of things, or daycare pickups. So it really helped my mental well-being. But then just recently I joined the AVMA Trust after the new year, this year, and it's really been a huge blessing. So, I know with the COVID restrictions and working from home, it's like a blessing or a curse, for different people, but for me, it's really been great. I can see the boys off to daycare in the morning. I can always pick them up at night on my lunch hour. I can start a load of laundry. I can do the dishes, those sort of things. So I'm really just incredibly reliable for my family, which is really nice. I don't have last minute emergencies or cases running over, and I still pick up relief shifts on weekends, so I can keep my toe in the water here and there. And I know you do as well, Dr. Kirk. So I think we would just really miss working with animals if we didn't 100%.
It took me a little bit to get back to that. Everyone's career is so different. That's what I love about the podcast. And there are so many people that, clinical medicine full-time is what works for them and their family. Part-time is what works for them and their family. Switching roles temporarily while the kids are really young is what works for their family. One thing that I have to say is I am forever grateful that I went into clinical medicine first. That's what my dream was, right? But when it wasn't working for me, I started exploring other opportunities and love my role at the AVMA. And eventually when I got my feet back under me, started doing clinical medicine. And because veterinary clinics are so overwhelmed right now, I've been picking up a ton of shifts. And that's been really fun though, to kind of start, like I've seen like regular patients, like I've seen repeat patients, which was kind of cool because I hadn't done that for years. But one thing that I have to say about making the switch, at least for me, from clinical medicine to, like something in the industry, or for us, association work, I just 2 days ago hit my 5-year anniversary for being at the AVMA. I still fully appreciate the regular hours and like the sick time. And I say that because last week I had to take some sick time, and like having that separated from my vacation time. And I know that doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but for me, it just is such like, okay, I'm taking this and this is important. And I still just marvel at that, or like getting, a holiday off or something. It makes me appreciate our colleagues that are working so hard, so much more. And if I can pick up a Saturday here or there that helps, I'm happy to do that. But I still haven't lost that like shine of, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this is really happening. And this opportunity was available to me.
Yeah, I definitely understand that, like the feeling of guilt taking time off when you were in clinical practice. Like if you had to call in sick, I'd be like, no, I know my favorite patient's coming tomorrow. Like I don't want them to be told they can't come. You'd always just have that guilt feeling they weren't getting their care they needed.
I always worried more about like, oh my gosh, like, we're going to be short staffed, and that just puts so much burden on everyone else. And so I definitely went to work, days that I was like, no, I should not have, when I just in that I got other people sick, I'm sure. And if we would just take a break and just stay home, like it would not run its way through the whole clinic. I look back and I'm like, man, I should have made better decisions.
We want to talk about your role at PLIT, and I want to talk about how you found it and what drew you to it. But I just want to highlight what you said there about kind of what helped, I think, what I'm hearing, make that shift from clinical medicine over to PLIT is when you talked about being reliable for your family versus unreliable. I've never heard somebody frame it that way. And I really like that, because I don't know if that maybe helps with the guilt sometimes of being away, but just thinking about it from that standpoint of being able to show up. And so I'm sure it sounds like that maybe played a part. So walk us through what it looked like, how you found the role at PLIT, and how you got into the role.
Yeah, so I actually worked at a small animal clinic with a previous trust veterinarian, and I always liked her little anecdotes and stories that she had. So I always had an interest in the position. And then when she retired, I threw my hat in the ring and I actually got the position. So I kind of fell into it, but I always, had a real interest in it. But it was really perfect timing. Like you said, with my family situation and whatnot, it was perfect timing that I needed to be more reliable. And it's nice though that I'm not, setting my career aside, and that's, I know you guys talk about on different shows about, the great thing about the veterinary medicine degree is how versatile it is and how many different types of positions there are out there, and historically my career always went first. And when I became a mom, my main focus shifted a little bit. But I'm still, I'm able to work full time. I'm still doing something I really love. I'm helping people, I still feel that sense of accomplishment or reward or whatnot, but it works better. It works better for my family, with the times and shifts and what have you.
I think that's so cool that like the seed was planted and you just always, think about it a little bit. So I don't know about you, but you read a job description and you're like, I think I have a concept of what this is going to be like. And then, you start the job and you're like, okay, yeah, this is what I expected. But I'm curious, are there other things that have surprised you about the role, or something that really stands out that you love? I mean, besides getting to hang out with me more, I mean, what are like the things that you have really come to, because you've been in this role now 6 months?
Yeah, 7 months.
Yeah. So, what are you finding? Like, you're probably finding your rhythm now. So kind of walk us through some of your favorites, but also kind of what your day is structured like.
Yeah. So, I think my favorite part of the job so far is reviewing claims, and I know you've talked to a couple other trust veterinarians already, and there's a lot of things that we do, you might think it's just reviewing the claims, but we, travel to the schools, of course, currently it's virtually, but this fall we'll start traveling to the schools and doing presentations with the students. And then we call them insureds, but, veterinarians who have professional liability insurance and are insured by the company can call anytime. So we take a lot of insured phone calls, to answer questions, or they're in a tough situation and need some advice. But I really love reviewing the claims, and it's really like I'm back at school. My textbooks are all dusted off. We do a lot of research, particularly I think my small animal surgery book gets the biggest workout, finding research or support for, certain claims or situations or whatnot. So my textbooks have really come out of the closet and getting a workout again. So that was my biggest surprise, is that I'm kind of like back at school.
That is really fun. And I'm just thinking too, literally the other day I was going to get something out of our storage area and I found my bin of vet school books and I was like, look, I can't get rid of you. And see, now it's even more reason, because you never know when you're going to need them again. And there's something, those Ettinger books were really big investments. So
yeah, they so were. Do you know, I have to say I have used them a little. I've dusted them off a little bit more. I really like diagnosing my own pets with things. And so having a puppy now, I'm like, well, I bet he has this, I had to look up all that, like when he was growing really quickly, there was one weekend where like you could not touch his limbs without him screaming. And I was like, the name was just on the edge of my brain. I'm like, what is it? So I had to pull out all my books and be like, oh my gosh, he probably has these 3 conditions and they're, and it was just like it was just growing pains. He ended up not having any of the, hypertrophic osteodystrophy or any of those like things. But I frequently like to give my own pets things. So I go to the textbook first before I text all my vet friend, like, do you think my dog has this?
And then sometimes Marcy and I like to really spiral, and then we like to text each other about it and fuel the mania around it.
Yeah, that's so true.
So, one thing I'm curious about too, is we've gotten to hear the stories of the other veterinarians on your team, and you onboarded and went through the interview process and everything still during a pandemic. So how was that process? Have you even met any of your coworkers in person yet, or has it all been virtually?
It has all been virtual, but we did do a photo shoot outdoors at a clinic because we had some curbside literature going out and they needed like curbside photos. So I met a couple coworkers at this photo shoot, and my dog Turtle became a star. If you see her in your different pamphlets or whatnot, that's my girl. But yeah, so only at the photo shoot did I get to meet some people doing our curbside stuff. But we'll probably be back in the office this fall, so I'll get to meet some people face to face. But yeah, it's all been virtual.
That is so wild to think about, especially because most of you guys are in the Chicago area. I know there's a couple that are, spread out, but most of you are in the Chicago area. I did get really excited when I saw Turtle come through on the newsletter, and Turtle's the dog. So I did keep that and highlighted that one for us. So you'll have to let us know when more are coming out. One thing I want to talk about is, you and I have chatted a lot, and you kind of had an analogy about hindsight being 2020. So how does that apply to insurance? Like, how do you kind of work through that?
Yeah. So, one of the biggest things that we focus on, especially when we're talking to students, is about tips on like risk prevention, and getting out in front of an issue before it becomes a problem or a malpractice claim. And there's 4 areas that we really lean on, and you'd think they'd be common sense, but, practicing good medicine, clear communication with your staff and your clients, good medical records, and safety. And like I said, getting out in front of things is really, what you need to do. And a lot of our cases are on like communication breakdowns. For example, let's say you have a traveling surgeon at your clinic for the day and they're bringing their own technician, and you didn't have a plan in place ahead of time on who is going to be responsible for post-op monitoring. Is it the surgery technician because it's their patient for the day, or is it the clinic's technician, the host clinic's technician that was working in the treatment area that day? And then of course something happens and you're left pointing fingers. So you need to have those policies in place ahead of time, so there's no confusion over things like duties or whatnot. And in regards to like record keeping, lately we hear a lot more of, I was really overbooked that day. I was doing two things at once. The clinic was in chaos, those sort of things. And there was gaps in maintaining good records, or anesthesia monitoring sheets were missing, went, got lost, didn't get scanned, whatnot. So I really encourage you to, if you're in that situation, to speak up for yourself and be your own advocate. In the end, you're responsible for your license. And if you feel your ability to practice is being hindered due to scheduling or lack of policies or delegation of duties, you just really, you got to get ahead of that. And for new grads, that might be a harder position to be in. But one of the facts that is in our presentations, from the trust team that really surprised me is that the United States has 5% of the world's population and 94% of the world's lawsuits. So it's a crazy thing to think about, but that's the reality of where we live.
That is so interesting. Number one, that statistic, I'm sitting with that for a second and like, oh, that makes you so nervous, but it really does frame. And thanks for walking through those specific examples, because I think as a new grad, or in times like this, when you are so busy, and we know that clinical medicine right now, people are very overwhelmed. And so it's really easy to say, oh, we'll do that later. We'll do those things. But like you said, having those clear things could really, I'm thinking even like flow of patient policies, things like that. Like, this could really save you sticking to those even in the chaotic times.
Well, and taking the time to like have some templates.
Yeah.
Because like that is a time saver. I love that. And the other thing, I love that you said about advocating for yourself, but I'm also really excited, and maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but I kind of felt like, so I didn't learn any of this until I went through my board complaint. So not a malpractice, but a board complaint. Those are two separate things. And we want to make sure people understand there's two separate coverages. But most of the time with like board complaints, you get tacked on of, here's what we would have recommended. And we would like you to do so many hours of continuing education on record keeping. Mm-hmm. And at that time, so this would have been, 6-7 years ago, I was like, I don't even know where you find, I ended up not having to do it, but I was like, I don't even know where you find this stuff. But I am seeing more and more about these like record keeping. And I'm so excited because AVMA convention has a session and I have signed up to moderate it. Cause I'm like, ooh, I want to learn about some good record keeping. Cause not only do we want tips about being thorough and getting all the information in there, but efficiency. So I would say probably my records are very thorough, but they're also like a book. They're like someone's textbook, because I'm like, we're getting all these details in there, but I could probably be a little bit more efficient with them. And so I'm really excited to see this trend of more information on that in veterinary medicine. Have you guys noticed, like, did you guys notice that, or was I just not paying attention before to record keeping CE?
Yeah, I think it's been available, but I also have not seen it at, the big conferences and whatnot as a main option.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I think because some of the veterinary groups I'm in talk about it, but I get a Facebook ad pretty regularly for this boot camp on medical records. And there's a small part of me that's like, first off, if you put boot camp in something, I'm like, this sounds intense and it sounds like a challenge and I want to rise to this challenge. But I think that's a really exciting trend. And hopefully, because again, it boils down to what you said at the beginning. Most of the claims that you guys see are from communication, and that could be person to person, but it could also be the communication in your medical records, mm-hmm. that are what you have to rely on.
Yeah.
So you touched on it a little bit, you talked about, especially new graduates, like being an advocate for yourself, especially in the beginning, when you're just you're not as efficient as, some of the other, you're still learning. Right. But do you have any like advice when it comes to liability insurance? Because what I'm thinking about here is I'm drawing from my own experiences, and from the beginning, I know there are some clinics that are like, yeah, our liability covers you, but I always had that like inkling of, I want to make sure that they're not covering the clinic, that they're covering me. So I always paid for my own insurance. And then also, the little extra, because it's not very much, for the licensure defense. And that ended up serving me very well, because when the board complaint came in, of the 3 veterinarians that were named on it, I was the only one that had licensure defense. So I was the only one that showed up with a lawyer and had the, prep work and all that stuff done. So that's always my piece of advice, is make sure if you're going under your clinic's policy, find out exactly what it is and make sure you're specifically covered, or just get your own, and also make sure it's licensure defense. But I'm curious now, someone who's on that side of it, like, what is your recommendation for new grads?
Yeah, so everything you said is 100% true. Definitely we recommend the licensure defense, but also just being like thoroughly covered. So I know you guys talked to Dr. Mulladoo, and she mentioned the $3 million racehorse she was working on, in her panic when she realized she wasn't covered up to $3 million. In the small animal world, you're like, we're never going to be at $3 million, but when you think about the coverages, the plan 1 coverage is $100,000, and you're thinking, no small animal claim is going to be $100,000, and claims do get pretty high. Like if you had a resection and anastomosis that dehisces, and then you're in the ICU and there's a surgical revision, and who knows, blood transfusion, septic abdomen, feeding tubes, they really add up to tens of thousands of dollars. But when you have a human injury, that's when it easily surpasses $100,000. And the example I like to give is a cat bite claim, and this one in particular ended up being a rabies exposure as well. But the owner brought in a kitten that, was a stray kitten they had found, and they insisted on holding during the exam, and the veterinarian allowed them to hold and pet and whatnot. And when the veterinarian was taking the kitten's temperature, it bit the owner, broke the skin. And of course, it became horribly infected. The owner was hospitalized on IV antibiotics, ended up in physical therapy and rehab and whatnot, to be able to use that hand again. And when anything happens within the quote unquote veterinary incident, that is what triggers your liability policy. So if that client were bitten out in the lobby, that's not during the veterinary incident. But when you're within the veterinary incident, within the exam, when they were bitten, that's covered under your professional liability policy. And in this case, the veterinarian only had the $100,000 coverage, and the bills and the total claim ended up being $150,000. So they were responsible for that additional $50,000 out of pocket. The claim paid out up to their coverage limit. So that was, an unfortunate situation. And I'm really only familiar, with the small animal world specifically, but, with those coverages, the difference between the small animal plan 1, which is $100,000, and plan 3, which is $1 million, is only $55 per year. So, it's totally worth it to just cover your buns and be safe. Every penny is worth it. In those human injury situations, they easily surpass 100,000.
Well, and what I'm learning from this mini series too is it's not just the coverage you're getting access to the trust veterinarians. So if you have any questions, you can call, and you get this expertise for what many of us find very intimidating and scary,
Yeah. And that's, an important thing for new grads to understand, or veterinarians who haven't been in this situation before, is that the trust veterinarians are always here to answer questions, or talk about a situation. And we've really heard it all. I promise you, we've heard all kinds of crazy stuff. And like you said, some people don't want to talk about it, or they're nervous about being judged or afraid that they're being judged. But we have 67,000 insured members. So, maybe you were extracting a tooth and you broke the root off and jammed it up in the nasal cavity. I can tell you, I processed that claim twice already this month. So, I'm not on the other side of the phone rolling my eyes. It happens. No one's perfect. And if you need help and you haven't dealt with malpractice situations before, we can give you tips on client communications or your next steps moving forward in the process.
Yeah, we got into that a little bit with Dr. Fry in her episode about just there is no judgment. I mean, because you guys have been there. That's what I love about having veterinarians on the other end of the phone. And Anna, you pointed out, I think it was in Dr. Molyneux's episode, where it's like having a veterinarian on the other end of the phone when she wanted to increase, her liability. Really, like, there was no question of like, I don't understand what you're trying to do. It's like, okay, yep, we got this. Like, we know what's happening. So and again, just knowing that you guys are people and you've been in the practice, situation before too. And I love that. I think all of you that we've talked to were in clinical practice first. So you bring that, not only the expertise, but you bring the unsure, like, I'm sure all of you at some point were like, I don't know about malpractice. I don't want to trigger anything. So you bring those questions and now you're on the other side and can kind of reassure people.
Yeah. And it's funny too, when I'm reading some of these claims, I can really like put myself in that veterinarian's shoes, and I'm seeing the like interaction and what's being said between, the client and the staff and kind of how it goes down. And like, sometimes my neck gets warm and I'm like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. Like, I know how that went down. So I really understand, some situations.
That's so funny. Even the empathy is still there, like the response to those situations. So, again, thank you for sharing those specifics, because I think this just really brings like so much light to the world of claims and to understanding. And I love what you kind of just reassured there with the no judgment, because when you're in one of those situations, you do feel like you're the only person that's ever made a mistake and every other veterinarian is surely perfect. And that is absolutely not the case. So I want to move us into our final questions that we like to cover with everyone. So our first one for you is, Kira, what is something that you are passionate about outside of veterinary medicine?
So I have been trying to learn photography. I bought a camera for myself last Christmas and took some classes. I just wanted to be able to capture nice pictures when my kids were young. But it's difficult. I'm like a C+ photographer right now. So, Marcy, if you want a C+ photo shoot of your new puppy.
Oh my gosh. I am dying for that. Like, if you can figure out how to get Bucky to sit still, I think that moves you automatically to a B+ photographer right there. So, I definitely thought you were going to say travel. Because you guys have gone to some amazing, well, you and your partner have gone to some amazing places, but the photography, I guess, fits into that too.
Yeah. And like I said, I've tried to take real nice photos, but it's a work in progress. I'm going to need some more classes once I have a little time. But yeah, we do love travel as well.
I am right now, we're saying it on the podcast, so it's going to happen, but I'm going to come to your new place in August with at least one of the dogs. And we're going to do probably both. We'll do some photo shoots because like we need some good photos of them. I bet if you looked at what my iPhone photos are compared to like what your phone, like there's a big difference. So I think you might be being a little hard on yourself, but that is really cool.
Yeah. And it's the equipment too. Like sometimes if you just pay the money and buy the camera, like things already turn out a little bit nicer, but yeah, it's still a lot of user error in there.
Sure. Well, there's the nicer equipment. There's more things that can go wrong with an iPhone. I point and I shoot. They're very good. I'm very happy with those. So as we kind of wrap up here, you've shared a lot of, advice and wisdom and thoughts. Do you have anything like a parting message in the realm of veterinary medicine or outside that you want to share with the listeners?
I think just always putting yourself and your well-being first. With my career, when I was starting to hit roadblocks with balancing family and career, I was fortunate to be able to make the changes where I could really reduce stresses in my life and that sort of thing. But, taking time for yourself, like I said, speaking up for your situation, if your ability to practice or your well-being is being affected by staffing or scheduling or delegation of duties, really speaking up for yourself is what I'd recommend. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with I'm sure you guys are, the AVMA Wheel of Well-Being, but that is a fabulous resource in just to have a few ideas to take a few minutes for yourself.
I'm just going to throw it out there. We did not pay Kara to say that. Anna and I were the creators of that wheel. We worked with Dr. Jen Brandt to make it before she was on AVMA staff. You just made my day by mentioning that, but it sits right next to the wheel of vomit and the wheel of chocolate toxicity, right? Like, and then you've got the wheel for you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, well, that is a good reminder for all of us. And like we were talking about earlier, especially in the times we're in now where everything is so chaotic, it's so easy to lose track of that. So good reminder and way to close us today. Kara, we are so excited for your new journey with PLIT and can't wait to see you at more AVMA things. And thanks for taking the time to be on the podcast with us today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to see you guys more too.
Yay. Well, thanks to you all for joining us on this episode of My Veterinary Life Podcast. We adore sharing this journey with you. You can always reach Marcy at mblpodcast@avma.org, and be sure to leave us ratings and reviews on Apple Podcast or whatever platform it is you use to listen. I hope that you have taken away the overarching message from our entire mini series with the PLIT Trust Veterinarians, which is that they are truly here to take care of the profession by taking care of you. We are all doing our best to practice in a very chaotic world, and also we are all human. So it's just so awesome to know that there's this team of veterinarians that each has such an amazing story, that all care so deeply for us in the profession and want to protect us so we can continue living out our dreams and taking care of the animal world around us. So, like Kara said, take care of yourself, and we'll see you next time.